There's a pretty one, Ulysses. There it is.
Hello, BookTube. I'm Sean the Book Maniac. Welcome to my Saturday reads. I will explain why. It's only very tangentially related to the biggest news I have on this Saturday reads, which is this is my first video for you all using my new iPad Pro. This was a combination Christmas birthday present to me from my parents. They were going to take me out shopping to buy it when I was home, but as you all know, or most of you know, I didn't get home to Canada for Christmas, so they sent me the money and I have it, and I love it. So if you compare the quality of this video, you know, I don't like the lighting in this room. If you compare this to, you know, whenever the last time I did one, 2 Friday reads ago or something, it's just like night and day. So I'm very, very pleased, and I'm not using a mic, but it sounds like mic quality. I would say that the mic that I recently bought, once I get the right adapter to plug it in, because of course Apple, like every other manufacturer of technology, they change everything every few years, so I got to get new adapters and new cords and new this and that. So I'm not able to plug the mic in yet, but this is pretty much mic quality, so I'm quite delighted with my new iPad Pro. Double hard drive, much more sophisticated camera, and the quality of the audio is just astounding. So very, very pleased. That's not precisely why I'm a day late, but it's a little bit related to it. I was testing out iMovie for the iPad. I did my edits to the book haul video on iMovie using my old iPad. That worked fine. I was quite pleased with it. There's things about iMovie that I liked better than I used KineMaster, premium version of that. And there was things about I kept feeling the audio would go down every time I'd cut a clip to cut out a cough or something. The audio would go up and down. So I decided, once I realized that iMovie for iPad is actually a pretty sophisticated program, but I'm not sure whether it was an iMovie problem, but what the video that went up last night on Friday, my Friday in Tokyo, was the wonderful chat I had with Raymond about his recommendations for Black History Month books. And when I finished editing it on iMovie, and then I uploaded it a couple days ago, some of you might have seen it in your feed and wondered why it was gone. Well, it was gone because I didn't proofread it. I didn't do a quick check, and all the cover gifts were gone except for one that was in the wrong place, and a whole bunch of things that I just hated. So I took it offline and I redid a lot of the editing, going back to KineMaster. Anyway, I'm back to KineMaster, delighted by all the things I can do there that I couldn't do, but that lost me a day of editing time and reading time, so that's why there was no Friday reads. So here I am on Saturday. It is 3:30 in the afternoon in Tokyo on Saturday. It's a little bit cold outside. I haven't been outside. I don't think I need to go out for a day or two. Just staying indoors, playing with my new iPad Pro. One of the things I have to get used to is there's no hole for the camera. Like, if I look where I used to look on my... Actually, I can't... I think I used to look at a little camera thing, lens, above. So that's what it looks like when I do that. But no, I have to look at the stop button. And I figured out that if you don't have it oriented the right way, where the camera's on the right side, you're looking in the wrong place. Anyway, these are all fun little things to sort out with my new toy. And here's the week in review. Next we have The White Ship by Charles Spencer. This is Lady Di's brother. I had no idea he was a popular historian. He's written a whole pile of books. But it's just really intelligent and entertaining. I don't know how you fabulous people do it, because it is just a delight.
Thank you. That's very kind.
So here you are to bring some of that verve and panache to my series. I'm sorely lacking in that department. We are here to talk very familiar, just from, you know, watching the news or being on Twitter with Ibram Kendi, but do you know anything about Keisha Blaine?
So yes, she's a historian as well. I actually have
she's the author of the new she's the author of the new Fannie Lou Hamer biography.
Yeah.
I have had an interesting reading week. I have my first bail of I'm still looking in the wrong place. I have my first bail of 2022 to tell you about, and that was this Indigenous novel from Canada, Home Waltz by G.A. Grisenthwaite. And you might remember that I said last week that when I read the first chapter or first few pages of this to Lindy for our reading project and told her how much I loved the writing, she said, well, I don't know why you don't like YA then, because that just sounds like YA. Well, Lindy won that argument, and I didn't have any problem with the writing. But we had a much longer discussion, which I think we're going to get into when we do our retrospective video wrap-up of that reading project, about child narrators, because we had quite a lot of interesting discussions and disagreements and points of view to share with each other about child narrators. And I couldn't stand being trapped in this 15-year-old boy's head. When I realized today that that's the whole 300-page novel, I bailed. The writing was great. I think it's literary YA, so that's my compromise with Lindy. But I can't stand being trapped in a child narrator's consciousness for an entire book. It makes me want to puke. Very interested in the indigenous issues of racism. There was stuff about grief, but really what this was about, the first 40 pages that I read, was all about wanting to get laid, hating the teacher, and bullying. And I mean, I'm interested in bullying. I don't know if interested is the right word, but I couldn't stand being trapped. So I bailed. And I finished 2 really good, if not great, books this week as well. The first one was a 4-star read for me, this French novel from 1936, Giono's To the Slaughterhouse, translated from the French by Norman Glass. I'm not sure what to say about it. The writing was extremely beautiful. It's one of those times where you really notice the writing in a translated work, the beauty of the prose, which I think is a real feat. And this was beautiful and extremely grotesque. It's a novel about World War II set in Provence, and half of the action is among the soldiers from this small town and the military units that they have joined, and their family back home. Now, we've all heard the horror stories about World War I, and boy, I experienced them in a really fresh way that I almost couldn't stomach in places. It does not shy away from all the blood and gore. I don't feel it was sensationalizing it, but I think it was certainly, for a 1936 novel, making a real point about war as Europe was heading back in that direction. Really quite delightful, whimsical, deeply perceptive portrayals of the life of the wives and girlfriends and parents and neighbors of these 2 main soldiers, Oliver and Joseph. And I was quite captivated by those sections. I was interested in the military stuff too, but boy, really was some tough reading, which I don't regret, but certainly content warnings galore about blood and guts. And now the central metaphor to the slaughterhouse is there's a lot about cruelty towards animals and animals getting sick, animals being butchered, that he is using as an analogy for what was happening to the young men sent off to war. And I think it was a little bit overdone, perhaps, but apt. I'm not sure if I'd read another one by him, and I don't yet have enough distance to be able to tell you why, but I think maybe one is enough. I hear all of his fiction is somewhat like this. I did find it hard to follow. Even though there was these 2 soldiers, I still had trouble keeping track of them and which one was the sister of the one woman and the boyfriend of the other, and that I have to keep flipping back, but that's probably a commentary on the reader, not the novel. I'm glad I read it. I gave it 4 stars. If you like war fiction, which none of you do, can't think of anybody, not very many people I know gravitate towards war fiction. This is one about that theme that I think is worth your time. And I have finished this Japanese novel, Shipwrecks by Akira Yoshimura, translated from the Japanese by Mark Ealey. This was originally published in 1982 in Japanese, and the translation is about 1996. This was fantastic. You don't get much more Japanese than this novel. It was such a metaphor and an analogy, a précis of Japanese history and culture. I'm still looking at the spot on my old iPad, bear with me. Set in the Edo period, which apparently began in 1603 and went till about 1870. It feels, the synopsis calls it medieval Japan, and so yeah, I mean, it's closer to the early Edo period. As I said, it's this small fishing village on the coast, on one of the islands. And when they say one of the islands, I presume it means one of the large islands, Kanto or whatever, not not a tiny little island, because there's tens of thousands of those all around the archipelago. When I say that it's such a Japanese novel, it condenses all of the stuff about Japanese insularity and suspiciousness and hardworking, tough Yamato spirit stuff into a story that takes place over a few short years in this village. And as I told you when I started it, was it just last week? I think so, a couple of weeks ago. The destitution of these people is such that most of the adults and even some of the older children have been indentured and sent to a neighboring village for 3-year servitude or a decade-long servitude to earn enough money to buy enough rice or whatever for their family to survive. And then the main thing where the title comes from, and I don't know that this is actually true in history. If it's true, I'd never heard about it. They managed to survive by, I'm not sure what the word is, pilfering things that come onto shore from shipwrecks. And they do not seem, from my reading of the story, to be foreign ships from other countries, but from other parts of Japan. And there's no consciousness in any of these characters. The story is refracted through the preteen boy Isaku, who I think by the end might be 15, but he seems much older because, medieval, there was no such thing as adolescence, and he's doing a lot of adult things to keep the family alive. But there's no consciousness of a larger Japan. The ships that break up on the rocks and then they go and take the proceeds, anything, whatever's there, alcohol, furniture, timber, hopefully lots of rice, that is what keeps them from starving to death. So they actually have a ceremony of prayer annually, praying for another shipwreck. That's all very vividly described. And in fact, it actually it's darker than that, and I'm not going to give it away. It's really well written / translated. It is not a character-driven novel in the typical sense, in that you don't go really deep into the characters, but I really got a sense of the relationships between these people, and it's mainly Isaku, his mother, and two siblings. The father's gone on a 3-year labor thing. The chief of the village and the young woman that that Isaku would like to someday marry, and so on. But mainly it's the sense of a community that is very insular, very superstitious, and the spiritual and economic reliance on these shipwrecks warps their society and warps them as people in ways. It's a very dark, harrowing story, and it doesn't have a happy ending, but just fascinating. Oh my God, I loved it. It's not a Sean book per se. I didn't love the characters, but it was just gripping. And I just kept nodding all the way. Oh yeah, this is a way of showing this aspect of Japanese culture and stuff like that. Really fascinating, not a happy story. I gave it 5 stars. I have started 3. Georgia recommended this one to me, and she said she was terrified to see whether I was going to like it. Well, I absolutely love it. It's early days, but I'm on page 28. A House in the Country by Ruth Adam. I think it was published in 1957, and it is about her husband, and kids, and some co-workers and friends, not really close friends, but that they had all been living together in London, and they wanted to get the hell out of London. It's near the end of the war, and they find this ramshackle manor house in, where is it? In Kent. And they rent it and all move in together. And it is huge. And it has the hired man, or the butler, has stayed there since the death of the last of this family that died out. And as part of the estate is that he's there in perpetuity, and he's an old man, and he knows all the family lore, and he gets them all set up. And it is just fascinating. The relationships between the people, I'm having trouble keeping them all straight, which is my major weakness as a reader when there's a whole bunch of characters, but it's easy to just page back and say, now, who is Timmy and who is this person and that person? But it's still early days, so they're just getting set up, and it's such a spacious, sprawling, cobwebbed, rundown manor house. It's first person narrated by the Ruth Adam character, and again, it's an open question whether this is a novel. It reads like a novel, but it's certainly based on her true experience. And she is interested in the history, and of course the butler guy knows all the history, and so you're always thinking about it. It kind of reminds me of James Lees Milne, who's the guy, the diarist, the gay or bisexual diarist, who I've read his the extracts from his diary called Some Country Houses and Their Owners, and I got partway through volume 1 of his collected diaries, and that gave me a grounding in kind of how to appreciate the history of a house and the character of a house in a way that is really serving me well as I move into a house in the country. It is completely engrossing and very light in tone, very easy to read, gorgeous cover, and I'm learning a little bit about Kent, just a little bit of, snippets of history. So there were Flemish Huguenots, how do you pronounce that? Huguenots, that Elizabeth I granted refugee status, and most of them went to Kent, and there's an architectural style that flows out of that in Kent, and I think this house maybe was, I can't remember now, but lots to appreciate and sink my teeth into with this one. So thank you, Georgia, you can relax. And I also started this collection of Japanese short fiction, Naoya Shiga's The Paper Door and Other Stories. I'm still not looking the right way. It's translated by Lane Dunlop. It is an ugly old paperback, but boy, the stories are really good. I'm enjoying them. I've read 3, and in fact, the next one is the title story, The Paper Door, and that's the one I read to Lindy, and I liked it a lot better than she did, so I've really read 4, but I'm going to reread The Paper Door. I think these stories are very vivid and quirky. For example, the second one is called As Far as Abashiri, and it is told through the perspective of a man on a train. It was written in 1908, man on a train in Japan, and a young mother with a baby and a toddler sharing his compartment. He's just eavesdropping and trying to kind of help her because the boy is, the toddler, the 5-year-old or whatever he is naughty, and he's trying to help kind of look after him and stuff. There's very little that happens, but it all seems pregnant with significance. But I couldn't tell you what the significance was. When I finished the story, it's only about 7 pages. I thought, oh, that story was about everything. That story encompassed every theme known to humankind, and how did it do that? So yeah, I'm finding these stories to be incredibly well crafted and enjoyable. And last but certainly not least, I started the Asian Canadian novel You Are Eating an Orange, You Are Naked by Sheung-King. And what an enigmatic little novella this is. Holy smoke, I don't know how to talk about it. It's basically a love story, a lust story, a relationship story between a young man and a young woman, and they seem to be on a trip to Macau, and he is Macauan, and so getting a lot about the history and the present day. I don't know how present day this setting is, but it feels very present day, because they're visiting Macau, and they're having a few little relationship troubles, but it's not clear yet how serious it is. But none of that is as important as the writing. There's a kind of at times, staccato quality to the prose that just keeps me on the edge of my seat, because the effect of it is to just, I'm like, what, why is it, what is this about? I don't know how to describe it. It's very early days. I don't know how far I'm into it. Not far, maybe 15%, but absolutely loving what I've read so far. So those are the 3 that I have started. So I finished 2 and bailed on 1, so that means I'm going to start 3. I'm going to start the other Indigenous novel from Canada that I also read to Lindy from. It is called All the Quiet Places by Brian Thomas Isaac. And I loved the opening paragraphs. And it was also told, I can't remember if it was from the perspective of a kid. I think it was a third-person narrator. But there was something really adult about the narration style. Certainly it was very, very pleasing. I can't wait to go back to it. It's his debut novel, coming-of-age story of Eddie Toma, an Indigenous kid of the Syilx Nation.
This is the traditional, ancestral, and unceded territories of the Syilx Okanagan.
Syilx. Okay, I was not pronouncing it correctly. Syilx. Here's the spelling. and here is the pronunciation, Shipwrecks. And this novel is the kid and the family that I met in the opening chapters and was just bowled over by the opening chapter is of that Shipwrecks nation. I can't wait to pick up with that one where I left off, and hopefully that will go better than the other one did. And it is high time that I finally got to Butter, Honey, Pig Bread by Francesca Ekwuyasi, a Nigerian-Canadian writer, a queer Nigerian-Canadian writer. This is one of Bill from Nairobi's favorite books, among many others. So it's been on my shelf forever. Now is the time. I am having such a good time just following my nose, and I picked this novel out about 3 hours ago instead of having it all set and prescribed for me months ahead of the time. Before I became a hardcore reader, but I was a fairly avid reader, but not obsessively so like I am now. I would never really think about which book I was going to start until I finished a book, and then I would just wander around my shelves that were as disorganized as they are now. This was in Vancouver, I remember, and it was such a deeply enjoyable ritual to just walk around and wait for one to jump out at me. And I'm trying to incorporate more of that spontaneity into my reading. So this is one of the ones that I chose that way, and the other one was just in my book haul and my 2021 books I didn't get to videos, The Manningtree, which is by A.K. Blakemore. So these two I'm going to start. So I am so excited about that. Well, my eyes have been going everywhere because I haven't trained my eyes yet to focus on where they're supposed to, so that I'm looking right into your eyes. So I'll get that eventually, but thanks for watching.